Hey everybody, it's Stephen Feuertips and I'm back after being away for a long time. Hope you had a great several months when you didn't get to see my face on a monthly basis. Probably wasn't too painful an experience, but I'm back. I'm back with Jon Dixon, who is a longtime Oracle database and Apex developer. He's going to do all the heavy lifting today. So we decided we'd hold this right before the long slide into the slowdown of the holidays. So hopefully you're all still engaged, and if you're in the United States, digesting all your food from a week ago. So what I wanted to do is kind of carry on a theme that I've touched on in the past and has really become a pretty active theme, I think, on Twitter, among other places, maybe LinkedIn. I don't know. I don't spend any time there, which is if you're using Oracle database, you should have Apex installed. You should use the Apex APIs, even if you don't build with Oracle Apex. And that's what we're going to kind of drill in on today. And I think I'll probably do another one or two of these along these lines. So Oracle Apex is this incredible application express rapid development environment, very declarative. It's this really wonderful combo of low code, high code, where you can get most of your work done building apps, but you can fall back and should fall back into SQL and PL SQL. And the team has not only built this great declarative interface, but this enormous swath of packages. I don't know, John, do you have any idea how many there are? You can go to apex.oracle.com/API. Anyway, drill down in great detail. Obviously, many of them are specific to Apex, but so many of them are not. And every back-end PL SQL developer should learn about those key packages. And I think Connor McDonald actually wrote a blog post or did a video on this as well. So obviously you can search it out. But right now what I'm going to do is turn it over to John. He's going to demonstrate some of that stuff. Then we'll take questions and comments along the way, of course, and then we'll sum it up. Take it away, John.
Thank you, Stephen. Well, thank you for having me on, and it's a great pleasure to be here. I'll give you folks a little bit of background about myself before I get started. My name's Jon Dixon, as Stephen said. I've been working with Oracle technology for more than 25 years. Spent the first 18 years or so with Oracle Consulting, extending and integrating with Oracle EBS, ERP Cloud. And then the last 8 years or so, I've been focused on building Apex apps and integrations, obviously with Apex and Oracle REST data services. So today, as Stephen said, I'm going to get into Apex string utility. And I fully endorse Stephen's statement to start with that even if, heaven forbid, you're not going to use Apex, it's absolutely worth installing it just so that you can make use of the phenomenal APIs. There's stuff from Apex string, which we're going to talk about today, to calling web services, generating, parsing JWT tokens, and everything in between it. So the demo I'm going to go through today, I've got about 12 examples of Apex string and its companion package, Apex string util. And for each example, I've tried to put together a use case so you can sort of picture where you might use this example. And obviously feel free to shout out if you guys have any examples as well that you'd like to share where you've used these particular APIs. So I'm going to get started simple with Apex string.getInitials, and it essentially does what it says on the box. So it will get the initials for two names or two strings. It doesn't have to be two names, obviously. So you pass in the string, the number of initials that you want back, and then it gives you those initials. If you ask for more initials than you have, it's still only going to give you just the first two. But it does also uppercase those initials. So you notice I got JD out of John Doe there. And then
I'm curious, John, on that particular one. So I definitely see it come up in cards or different elements of Apex.
Yes, exactly.
Can you think of other use cases where folks might want to use that? Not to put you on the spot.
I've primarily used it in cards and things like that, where you've got a little bit less space, or maybe if you're emulating a chat window, like Teams within Apex, because there are some template components now that you can generate fantastic UIs. So you could really generate a widget for chat, and then using the initials in that is a good way of using a little bit less space. So that's Apex string. Again, if you pass in 3 and there's 3, you get 3 back. So it does what it says on the box. Again, keeping it simple, but you could argue you could do this with your own PL/SQL code, but why would you want to? So Apex string util to display file size, it's a mouthful, basically takes a value in bytes and gives you a human readable file size. So 1.2 gigabytes for that amount, and it changes the unit based on the number of bytes. So this is really useful. Like, I do a lot of work integrating with SharePoint. So if you're listing files out of a SharePoint folder and you want to give the file sizes to users in a readable format, this is a great way to do that without having to write the code yourself. And that's what these APIs are all about, is doing this without you having to write the code. Even if it's 10 lines of code, it's 10 lines of code. You don't have to maintain. The Apex development team are maintaining it for you. All right, we'll move on. The next one is apex string util.get domain. Again, you could probably write a regex to do this, but why is the question again. So this will extract the domain out of an email address or a website address, for example. And one place I've used this, if you're doing, say, Office 365 authentication with your Apex apps, and your AD setup allows multiple domains to log into your application registration in AD, then you might want to check the domains that are logging in and maybe restrict certain domains. So if you have just like a partner company that you want to be able to log in, but no other companies, you could check the domain and reject that user if they're in incompatible domain.
I just so wish they wouldn't use get underscore in the front of their function names, though.
Yeah.
We know you're getting something. It's a function.
Is that a philosophical debate we want to get into today, or is that?
It's my show. But do you like it?
No, I don't. But it's.
Yeah, we agree. We don't have to get into a debate.
I love getting into debates, so that's right. But even if I'm on your side. So then that's the domain from a URL and the domain from an email address.
And if you put a slash after the cloud something.com with other stuff on it, it'll pull out just that part.
Yeah. Well, we can only hope. I
mean the URL.
No.
In the URL, if you do a slash?
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. It's more like that. It's not picking out. Some APIs we'll get to in a little bit that will pick out emails from a string. But this is just, it's assuming it's a well-formed or reasonably well-formed email or URL. This next one, people may have come across the ones we've gone through so far. I notice people don't use this a lot. I find it quite useful, and it's apex string.format. And for those familiar with Apex, it works like Apex debug. And I tend to use it for log messages because it allows you to essentially write the message you want and just put %s where you want the variables, and then you pass in the variables afterward. The alternative is to concatenate these variables, and you soon start getting into a mess. Although technically this is shorter than this line, it's a lot easier to read this in the code just to know what's going to come out. But at least to my eye, it is. You can generate the same content, but you can have X number of variables after here, and it makes this part more readable to the developer. So I tend to use that when I'm formatting my debug messages.
Yes, can you go back to that for a second?
Yeah,
I
sure,
hate
sure.
how SQL Developer by default grays out dbms output line calls, but so when I need to look at the API for format, because you're saying you can have any number of percent.
Well,
Probably like
I
up to
shouldn't say any number. Yeah, let's actually, you mentioned
because I'd love to be able. I don't think that we can yet do our own variable number of parameters, but I thought maybe so.
no, it's not. Sorry, I was just going to take you folks into the documentation.
Yeah, so again, apex.oracle.com/API gets you all that stuff in an instant.
Yes.
Okay, that's all right. I'll look it up. I'm sure it's not.
Oh, there you go. It's 19.
20, starting at 0.
20, sorry, yes.
19, that's a funny number to stop at. Okay, continue.
No problem. All right, next up is apex string.split, and this is probably the one I use the most as an Apex developer, or at least close to the most. So if you're using a pop-up LV or new in Apex 23.2, the combo box, it's a nice new widget in Apex 23.2. And you want to allow users to multi-select from a list of values. You can define the delimiter, but it defaults to giving you a delimited string of ID values that looks much like this. And then you need to do something with that in your relational database. And apex string.split value does, or split, well, there's variations of it, I should have mentioned. There's split numbers, split clubs, split characters, which is the standard split. You don't need, obviously, back in release 11 of the database, you needed to specifically call out that that was a table of converting that PL SQL array into a table. But you don't need to mention that table clause in the later versions of the database.
Yeah, you know, I still find it, I think we're on, in my environment, I think we're on 18. And it still seems like in some cases inside PL SQL, you still need it. It's so interesting.
Oh, wow. That's cool. That's interesting.
Maybe when it's not a function, maybe when it's a collection itself, not a function. Anyway, you'll find out it won't compile.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the hard part, right? Now we've got this in a table, so we can now do stuff with it. So in this second example here, I'm just querying a list of the items that match that item ID, but you could be doing many other things with that. So I'm just doing a scalar query on those results of that apex string that split numbers. And obviously, if they were not IDs and they were character values, you'd use apex string.split. I was just doing some research for this show and realized there's also now a split clubs, so you could split clubs as well. So that's pretty cool. This is where we're coming back to email addresses and URLs. So another thing I find myself doing these days is using the rich text editor in Apex more and more. And if you want to embed images or links in the rich text, and you want to maybe check those links before you post it to your database, either to check for certain, make sure they're all HTTPS links, that kind of thing, then you can use this find links API. So it'll basically go through, I just sort of mocked up something that looks like HTML, but I obviously haven't closed my p tag, which is not good. But so basically strip out anything that looks like a URL. So again, there's probably regexes you could spend 20 minutes on Stack Overflow and find one to do it, but the Apex team have done it for you. Similarly with email addresses, it's just stripping out a list of email addresses from a string, and it's this I do use.
Find underscore. That's silly.
Say that. Pardon me, Steve?
It's called find underscore. It should be get.
It should be consistency. And the last one in this sort of find underscore series is tags. So you can, again, I haven't got a use case for this one yet, but I did notice this as I was researching this post. So it's just going to strip out tags. It does uppercase them, which is unfortunate because everybody loves the lowercase Oracle APEX tag. So it's not good for Apex, but it does pick out tags. And more seriously, they're probably not going to be Twitter or whatever tags anyway. The tags that you've got in a string that you want to fetch out.
And it's just a leading. I assume you can pass the character that you want.
Yes, you can make this tag anything you want. Yeah.
And it only looks for a leading one. I would have thought it was looking for a start and an end, but I guess that's the email tags in Apex.
Yeah, like a replacement string kind of thing. Yeah, that would be useful actually, to strip out or to perform a replace on tags, like a function that would take a string and replace a tag with a value. You give a list of tags and a list of values, and it would just do that replace for you. Well, actually, there is one, because you can use Apex Mail the template generation in Apex Mail to do that for you. Even if you don't send an email, you can use the mail template substitution code to do those substitutions. Right, so now we're moving into slightly more complex, I guess, Apex string.push. And this is essentially maintaining a PL SQL array for you. There's other variations, so you can have collections of numbers, clobs. You can even have a situation where you can add an array to an existing array with Apex string.push. There's variations of this with different data types. In this example, I'm essentially going to loop through the items that we saw. So if I just query that, so just a certain subset of items that are orderable, and I'm going to loop through the items, and for the ones that are inactive, I'm going to add them to this PL SQL array. And more realistically, this is quite useful sometimes if you're running a long-running process in PL SQL and you want to keep track of maybe failed records somewhere. You can keep track of them in a PL SQL array, and then when you get done with your processing, go back through them afterwards. And then I'm going to just output that array, and I'm using another API, apex string.join, which will take an array and give you back a delimited string. So let me run that guy so you can see what that looks like.
Essentially a list tag. It's like a list tag.
Exactly, yeah. So it's just giving me the list of all the inactive items from that list. Again, not especially representative example, but it can be useful for long-running operations just to keep track of what's going on. And the slightly more evolved version of that is Apex string plist. So the series of APIs, you're basically maintaining a key value pair. So there's a get, put, push, delete, so everything you need to maintain that list of key values. So in this example, I'm just bringing back an item and a status, and I basically want to keep track of how many items have each status. Again, could do a SQL query much more efficiently than what I'm doing here, but this is just to illustrate a simplified example of where you might use this. So I'm attempting to get the current value for this key. And obviously, first time around the loop, it doesn't know about that key. So this is going to actually raise a no data found exception. And at that point, I'm adding that status to the list. So the first time it sees each of these statuses, I'll get a when no data found, and that status code will get added to the list with a count of 1. The next time it finds that status, it's going to return the current count, and then I'm going to update it with the increment. It's basically going to count the number of times it's come across each of those statuses. Then just for fun, I'm going to add another value to the list, output everything so we can see where it's at, and then I'm going to remove, just so I can show you guys how you can delete a value from the list for a particular value. And then we'll see the final result there. So let me just expand this a bit. sorry, window management. So you can see it found 1,077 status for end of life. You can see all the different statuses and counts. Unknown was added, and then unknown was deleted before the final output. So it's basically a tiny database in memory, I guess, in PL SQL, if you needed to maintain a more complex key value pair during a process. All right. So the next set is two more, I think, after this. Is Apex string util.getSlug. So this is essentially going to get rid of everything in between, spaces, punctuation, that kind of stuff, to give you a simplified string. So the reason I've come across this recently is I use Hashnode for blogging, and it creates a slug out of your post title, and that's what it uses for the URL. So it essentially just removes all the spaces and puts a dash between each character, lower cases everything. But what's interesting about this is it will also generate a hash. So you could make a unique string out of my name. So you can see I've put the exact same one in twice here, but I've got a different hash out of it. So you could generate a unique string. It also is useful for getting rid of anything but letters and numbers. So you could use getSlug to give just a straight letters and numbers alpha numeric values, and then you could replace the delimiter with something else. So if you wanted to convert a whole set of text into something that's just alphanumeric, you could do that with Apex string util.getSlug.
And you can't provide the delimiter as part of the call to get slug, like don't use a dash, use a star, things like that.
I don't think so, no. Is that string util? Just double check. Yeah, no, it's just the string and the hash length. That would make it more useful, because in fact, not often, but I have done this where I've used Apex string.getSlug and then had to do a replace to get rid of the dashes for something else.
And by the way, I was muted before, but I'm really disappointed to see them use no data found as the exception when you try to get and you don't find
for PL SQL.
Oracle has already abused that exception horribly. It's scenarios. How they made it worse.
Yeah, I agree, because I was putting this together and I couldn't figure out what exception was getting raised. So I guessed at no data found the second time around. I thought, oh wow, okay. All right, we're getting down to the end here. So replace white space is a somewhat related cousin to getSlug. So it's removing some special characters. It does allow you this time to put the delimiter in. So I've never used this one, I have to admit. I think they probably could have created one that did both of these with some parameters. I don't know what they would have called it, but because this is kind of halfway house between the two, because it doesn't get rid of all the special characters. So it's a strange one, but it might be useful to somebody. And that's it for the demo. I'll just give another shout out to the documentation that you mentioned before, Stephen. It's bookmarked for me. I'm in there every day. I think anyone who's developing PL SQL, like you say, even if you don't want to use Apex, heaven forbid, then install it anyway, so you can improve your productivity with the APIs that come with it.
Fantastic, thanks. And I want to give a quick shout out to something even more basic than this API. Can you share my screen, Mark? Or yeah, my window, right. There we go. So that means I need to switch over to it. So I've been doing a lot of work with Apex Mail, actually building a layer on top of Apex Mail we call InSum Mail, now InSum Comms, to make it easier and easier and easier to manage templates and send them out. And one of the things, so I've created this send procedure, which was inspired by Anton Nielsen, who's on this call, to say, let me just have one procedure that I can call that will do everything for me, because I had an API that had like multiple calls. And so what I want to do is give a shout out to APEX-T Varchar2. You've been using it. I don't know if we saw an explicit usage of it, because that's the data type that many of those functions return, or APEX-T number or APEX-T clob, I assume, for returning clobs. But it's a nested table. So for example, we wanted to pass in multiple twos. I want to send it to multiple people. And what we could have done was just make it Varchar2. And then in our call, here's an example of a call. Then our P2 would be just, let's say, would it be a string, right? So ABC, comma, DEF, etc. And then you have to parse it apart the string. But with APEX-T Varchar2, you just make a call to the type of the function. So here, for example, I'm passing bind names. So I just pass in the values that I want. It immediately converts it. So if I had two of them, it was, big val, maybe something else. But it's so easy to manage these arrays. And then inside the code, just to give you a sense of the flexibility, again, these are things that Jon just showed you, but just to drive it home. So I'm passing in my array of bind names and bind values. I can just say select from that array as if it were a table. And here I think is an example of where it's actually still required, at least in 18 and 19. So I want to grab all those values and stick them together. In fact, this could probably be one of the components from Apex.
Apex string.join. Yeah. I didn't want to call it out, but
Yeah, let's put a comment in here.
It's funny you mentioned APEX-T Varchar2. Philip Hartfeller did a blog post recently for Joel Kelman Day, Ode to APEX-T Varchar2.
That's good. Yeah, I should look it up. Thanks. You don't have to share it anymore, Mark. That's good. It's a very simple little thing, but I think it's just a great reminder that there's such a tight integration, increasingly tight integration between SQL and PL SQL, that you've got these built-in nested table types. Obviously, we could build our own nested table types and do the same thing. But going back to Apex providing this foundation of code, it's not just functions and packages, it's types. So you don't have to declare your own type over and over again. Just use APEX-T Varchar2. You can use it in queries, iterate through it, and then, of course, leverage your APIs more effectively, which I'm going to work on that. So thanks, Jon. Folks, we had a couple of comments from Anton. If anybody else has any questions or comments, now's the time to raise them. And for those of you who have been around Feuertips in the past, so I will generally offer my favorite book or movie, et cetera, and finally declare them to be favorite cultural artifacts to get as much variety as I could. And for my special guests, I offer them the opportunity to share their favorite cultural artifact or fact.
So I have both of those things, Stephen, as you know. Artifact, the show that I really enjoyed. I went through the books, Silo. I don't know if you heard of Silo, but the books were phenomenal. And then the Apple TV recently did a show called Silo. So that's my favorite show of the last 5 years or so.
What's it generally about?
So it's about, society fell apart as it does, and everybody built these underground silos. You could probably fit 20,000 people in each one, and they lived independently. They didn't know the other silo existed. So that this is 20 generations down the line. They thought they were independent, and then there's societal issues within each silo, and the kind of things that happened in society before it fell apart starts happening again, but in this new construct.
Yeah, sounds interesting. Thanks.
It's a really well acted show too. And my favorite fact, just because I'm from Wales in the UK, not sure if everybody knows, but there are more sheep than people in Wales, which is an interesting fact for some people. And I think it's the same in New Zealand as well, actually. But
we got on the call in about 10 minutes, 15 minutes ahead of time. So we talked about sheep actually for quite a while. There are so many interesting sheep facts from Wales. Like sheepdogs that cost $10,000.
Yeah,
wow.
It's a big deal. Yep.
Yeah, nice. All right. Well, thank you so much, Jon. That was really interesting, and you've certainly inspired me to do more of my homework on those APIs and use them even more. I'm going to shrink my code down even more.
So awesome.
And we'll have the video up on YouTube, so people will be able to view it in the future. And yeah, thanks for coming on, and enjoy your Apex PL SQL development onward.
Thank you, Stephen. Have a great day.
Thanks.
Cheers. Bye-bye.